it's amazing how much the mind, your mental and emotional state plays into endurance sports and training and performance and race day. And like I was talking to an athlete last week, I think, who's training for Ironman Arizona, and I was like, at some point, your mind is going to have to catch up to your body, because the way you think right now is the way you thought 2 years ago when we started working together. You still see that same athlete, that same novice, that same person who still needs this, who's really weak on the bike. I was like, your mind is still there. Your body has totally left that behind.
Good morning, Coach.
Good morning, and hey, it's November. We're already here.
It is.
It snuck up on us.
This is the month we've all been waiting for.
It's what everybody keeps saying. Everybody's like, I can't wait to get to 2021. I'm like, listen, I've yet to see things trend positively, so I don't know why we're kind of jumping the gun on the fact it's all going to change in 63 days or whatever it is.
Yeah, like one day's going to flip a whole switch.
It's not going to work like that. But yeah, November is one of my favorite months, if not my favorite month of the year. But yeah, welcome aboard. This is Crushing Iron Podcast, episode 422.
I'll take your word for it.
422. Yeah, I'll someone will double check us, but we're around those parts, 422-ish. It's November 2nd, 2020. We appreciate you tuning in. If it's your first time joining us, thank you. You know you have a lot of options in the podcast universe, but today you've given us a shot, so we appreciate that, and we'll give you our best for the next 60 minutes or thereabouts. We cover all things triathlon and all things life. We cover swim, bike, and run specifics. We'll do race recaps, race previews, which we'll do more and more of here, hopefully in the next few months, because they are back and they are happening. Ironman Florida set to take off this Saturday, along with Florida 70.3, formerly known as Gulf Coast 70.3, one of my all-time favorites. And then in 2 weeks, you've got Ironman Arizona and Ironman Cozumel, Galveston 70.3. You got Daytona, Challenge Daytona. You got a Florida 70.3 in Hayden City coming in December. Could be a very, very busy next 40, 45 days. So we hope you are either tracking those, you're getting excited that races are popping back up, but for the most part, what we try to do on this podcast is just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about triathlon and life and what's going on with us personally, both as coaches and athletes, and then occasionally what's going on with our own athletes. We'll oftentimes pop into our Facebook group, which you can search by going to Crushing Iron Group right there on Facebook. Answer one simple question. We will let you in. And a lot of great conversation there, a lot of great people, a lot of wisdom, a lot of great feedback, and you can pop in there if you want. And sometimes we'll let that group drive the discussion for the day, but that's it. We have no sponsors. We have no ads. Our only agenda is to keep you happy and healthy and enjoying your experience in the endurance sports world.
A nice intro.
Thank you.
If you are optimistic about 2021, you can check out our new club program.
Look at you, dude. You're on it. Happy Monday.
All you got to do is go to C26 Triathlon and go to the coaching tab and pull down and click on the club, and it explains everything. Basically, we're going to outline your training plan for the next year around your A race and other races. That's it.
That's it. It's a short, sweet. It will be honest. It's a great program. We've done it before. We had a lot of great feedback. We have a lot of athletes pop in there just in the last week, since it seems like people are kind of getting their eyes set on specific races, and now they know that what races are going to happen or not happen this year. They kind of got their calendar fully set for next year. Most of them are already packed. Sometimes with races they wanted to do, they're kind of doubling up. So it could be a jam-packed year. It could cause some confusion and some stress. And I will say that of all the benefits that having a training plan and coaching laid out for you, what it does for most people is they are surprised by the stress relief that it is to just wake up, know what you're supposed to do, don't have to worry about it, don't have to stress about it, don't feel like you're letting yourself down or you have these expectations, but you just get up, you work out, you do the work, you move on to the next day, and that's what the club membership does, and we can plan your year for you. Again, that's at our website, c26triathlon.com, coaching tab, scroll down, click, peruse, purchase, and we'll see you then.
That sounds good. Yeah, there's been a lot of people coming in, I got to be honest, and I've been working really hard to stay on top of it and organize in communication with everybody, and we're trying to make everything work around your goals and what the kind of fitness you're in right now, and it's a great process, and it's fun to get to know a lot of people, and I'm excited about the community as well that's going to be happening, and we'll be meeting you out at races and all kinds of stuff like that, so
it's going to be a good year.
Check it out. Yeah, it's going to be a great year.
What they keep telling us. Do you have a topic for today?
No.
No,
I don't.
All right, well, and I don't
I'm
either.
Sure you do. Oh, you don't?
I don't either. So, we'll pack it in. We appreciate you tuning in. This has been Crushing Iron Podcast 422. We'll see you on
We'll see you
Thursday.
tomorrow for our live simulcast of the election results.
Oh, God, we're not doing. I'm kind of no, we're not going that way. I'm not doing it. I'm not even going to venture that area. I don't. But, it's like I'm just going to hunker down. I'm going to put my hoodie up tomorrow and just kind of mind my own business and just kind of continue on. That's just kind of what I'm doing. Keep my head down and do the best I can. I thought I might venture out and talk a little bit about. We could do Ironman Florida, which I do want to say, like, and I mentioned this morning in the weekly email that I send out for athletes that, as usual, emails go only about 10% read, but that if you're participating in, and this is race week for you, or you have a race week coming up at any sport, whether it's a marathon, a ultra, a cycling event, whatever it is, and you've made it through this entire year of staying focused, then I believe you've already been rewarded. And I know that sounds probably cliche, or you might be thinking like, wait, what do you mean I've been rewarded? It doesn't feel like I've been rewarded. I'm tapering. I'm going through crazy pains and taper niggles, and I'm hangry all the time. Like, what do you mean I've been rewarded? But
you and your optimism.
I know.
Come on, man.
I know, man. It's kind of annoying sometimes, but I do think that I truly believe that through the midst of what's been a very challenging and trying year for a lot of athletes, that a lot of people have been able to find their way and to find growth and to find, again, optimism and just continuing on a path with unknowns. And I think it's an overall great lesson for us to have just in general, because I think many people have gone through life, and especially triathletes with their training, is that you build everything you do so much on expectations and what you envision and what you expect to happen. And even just for I read this every day in Training Peaks, is people wake up and they go out and they're like, this run just wasn't what I was expecting it to be, or it wasn't what I hoped it would be. And while I think that leaves us a lot of room to be let down and very infrequently lift it up, because most of the time our expectations, even if you meet them, you think, oh, okay, well, that was fine, and then you kind of move on. But oftentimes you're kind of let down because your body didn't hold up the way you wanted to. It was too hot outside, or like this last weekend, I think like 80% of the comments I read this morning was like, it was super windy. It was super windy. It was super windy. Like, we had the same thing here last night when the cold front came in. It was very, very windy yesterday. I experienced a little bit of that precursor wind on Friday as I ventured out into the lab. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on the podcast. But I think it's been a good thing for those athletes to figure out that you can endure and be resilient and show up. And if you're towing the line this weekend again at Ironman Florida or Florida 70.3 or any of the races coming up, and you've just found yourself healthy and happy and hopefully grateful to be able to accomplish or have the opportunity to accomplish something as big of an event as Ironman is to a lot of people, then you should feel like you've already kind of made it. And we've used this analogy before that Ironman really is kind of like or race day specifically is more kind of like, the graduation day. You've done all the work, you've gone through all the hardships, and it's not like you look back on your, when you're older, and at least this is what I hear. I'm not a college graduate, so I can't really confirm or deny this. But from what I hear, most people are like, man, you know what I remember back from college? Graduation day. It was. I remember getting my cap and gown. I remember sitting there bored stiff for 4.5 hours as I went through alphabetically, and went through the names, and it really changed my life. Most people they share stories and experiences they had with their friends or teachers that had impact them. That's what you remember the most, and hopefully you can go back and instead of digging back and looking through your Training Peaks to find these PR runs, and these PR rides, and these great swims, is look back through and look through your comments. I do this frequently with athletes. Is like, everyone likes to go back, and as I was sending out emails last night to give athletes power numbers for the race, you look through that, but then I always kind of encourage athletes, don't look back and look at your worst run or your best run or anything in between. Look back for the comments. Look back for the days that said, man, I really didn't want to get up today. I thought this run was going to be terrible, and it ended up being awesome. Or, the ones that were great experiences, or the ones where you said, I didn't think I was going to have it today. I never thought I could run this pace, and I ended up showing up today. Or the ones where you woke up and you were like, I can't believe with this much fatigue I was able to produce this. Like, the experiences that you have, because I think I think that's one of the things that it's often not talked about enough in endurance sports, is that it is constantly up and down. It is with your emotions. You're having a great day, because no day is ever the same. That's why I get so annoyed when I see like the beat yesterday hashtag. It's like, you're not beating yesterday. It's not possible. You can't beat yesterday every single day of the week. But there are so many ups and downs, just like life. That's why triathlon endurance sports, I think, resembles life so much. Is there's always ups, there's always downs, and oftentimes it happens each and every week. So you have to be able to adapt and just kind of accept things. As you and I talk about time, is kind of like live in that gray zone of you don't get too high, you don't get too low. You just try to stay even. You try to kind of stay on point, and that is very much what triathlon is and training. But it's also what, if you're going out to race, you are going to have that experience. You're going to feel both like a professional athlete at some point in the race, and you're also going to feel like you have no business running 300 meters. You're going to feel all those. But the thing is that every feeling, I think that's one of your favorite quotes from Will Emery back in the day, that I think it was something along the lines of, don't believe anything you feel on race day, because it's about to change in like the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's always going to change.
Yeah.
No matter if it's high or low and whatever. You said something early in that, is that when you open Training Peaks comments and you see the first thing is, boy, was it windy today, or whatever. Or I went to the pool and there's like 8 people flopping around in my lane, and there's all these kind of things that go on in training. And I think, we have this, we all, like you're saying, you always want to be better today or feel great or whatever the thing is. But like, I really have, I don't know why, or I've just always sort of naturally gravitated towards really embracing the crappy days in a way. Not in the sense that like I like it per se, but like I always try to use it in a way. Like I actually commented to Heather this morning about a swim she did, and there was a lot of people in the pool and all kinds of craziness and stuff. And she mentioned how she just tried to stay in her box, and like, cause you can use that as a race prep, right? And those little opportunities, whether it's windy out or it's too hot or you dressed wrong or whatever the case may be, instead of like, in the spirit of optimism, instead of
rubbing off on you, man.
I know. Instead of complaining about it or really being beat down about it, think about it in terms of like, okay, this is prepping me for that unknown moment in a race. And now I understand that. And if I can remember this, my brain can go back to like, oh, remember that day? We did it already. We've been through it, because Ironman is the mystery so much, especially for first timers. And, for all of us, really, you just never know what's going to happen out there. So the more things you have in your toolbox, so to speak, mentally, the better off you're going to be. So I think how do we, kind of reshape our viewpoint on these kind of events that happen, instead of being kind of all mad about them or crushed about them. It's like, all right, well, this kind of sucks, but it's going to be a payoff. It's sort of like, just being used to it. And that's why, it's like, I don't know, if you have a wetsuit, swim in a race, it's good to get in the wetsuit a few times, because it's going to feel terrible that first time you put it on.
Is. It is. It's like your body's being like suffocated in a vice.
Yeah. Just walk around the house or something. Like just get it on.
So.
I mean, you have to go through it. And the more times you can go through things like that, the better off you are when it's unexpected.
I actually love what you said right there about Heather. And I think that's actually just a really great topic, and something that I've been thinking about is like, some of the best athletes I've ever worked with and currently work with always find opportunity within inconvenience. Mm-hmm. And that, like what you said, what you were saying about Heather, is like, that's a great example of like, you have 2 different kind of sets of, I'm sure you have in between, but you have 2 types of people. The one that walks on the pool deck and they're like, oh my God, 8 people here flopping around. They're in my lane. They're in my way. I'm just going to sit here and wait for 55 minutes. And then I'm going to get really annoyed. And then I'm going to complain about it. And then I'm going to hop on Facebook and like check in at the YMCA. Oh my gosh, pool's crowded again. When are these people going to leave? Like, you're that guy. And you end up being like, coach, sorry, I only got 20 minutes and I was waiting for a lane for an hour. And I'm so over this whole COVID thing. And then you have the other athlete who is like, all right, cool. There's a lot of people in this lane, but what I can do is turn this inconvenience into an opportunity, which for her was, I have things I can work with. And we talk about that at camps when we talk about open water swimming, is like, you own your space. And that's, I think, ever more important for athletes who are doing like open water swims. And, we're not doing mass starts right now, but they will come back, is to own your space in open water and practice keeping your arms out wide. And I think it's just a great example of finding those, because it's so oftentimes like and again, going back to like you're reading comments and you have like this expectation, or, oh, it was windy and it just wasn't my day. And like a lot of times we choose that based on like the first hint of inconvenience, that we have. And we always have opportunities. Like this morning for me, like I woke up and for just whatever reason, I just was off today. Like I was just like struggling, and like November is a really, really important month for me. It's both a one that I'm incredibly grateful for, but one that's also very hard. It was the month that I ended up going into treatment and getting sober. So while it's a month where I get to celebrate, my sobriety and all things that are different in my life being totally different, it's also just a difficult month for me to like work through emotions and feelings and whatever. And it's like, I can have those and just kind of brush them off and be like, I'm just going to be grumpy today about it. Or I could be like, I've tried to be at least the last few hours. It's like, all right, why do I feel this way? And how can I work through it? Because I don't want to continue to feel this way, but also these are pretty okay feelings to have, like it's nothing bad. So I can ignore it and just be grumpy just for the sake of being grumpy or in a bad mood or short or feel like I'm having a struggle day. Or I can be like, all right, this is an opportunity for me to think through all these feelings and all these thoughts and end up coming out of it something that's positive, and work through them instead of ignoring them, which is what I think a lot of people do with most things in life, is we just ignore them. And, another good example, like of training wise or triathlon related, is when I went out to, I didn't really tell anybody I was trying to do this, but I had like this hankering to go out into the 100-mile ride at the lab, which is,
I get that.
It's like, it's just like, that's stupid. Like it really is. It's like, people are like, why? And I was like, I don't really know why, but mind your own business. It's for me. It's not for you.
You're like, hey, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, awesome.
Yeah,
because
like,
I'd be
awesome.
Supporting you on that. I'd be like, I'm all in on that kind of stuff.
It's just like, so it's like the lab is it's a 1.2 mile airfield strip and in East Nashville, and it's always incredibly windy. It is boring as all get out because it's just one loop, and you go out there and you just do it. And so I've attempted it before. It's a lonely 1.2. There's no shade. You're kind of you get sucked into the wind, and it can be just mentally exhausting. And I tried it before. I think it was like 2 years ago, and I was able to make it like just under 96 miles when my bike computer shut off. Which, like I did a couple more laps, but at that point it's like, did it even really count? Did it even really matter? And so I started getting back into bike shape. I'm hoping to race Texas 70.3 here in a few weeks, and I've gotten into fairly pretty good shape basically I haven't ridden the bike in like 2 years, and I've been hitting it hard and doing my best. And so I was like, you know what? I think I want to just kind of give it a shot. I want to go back and just kind of see not really kind of see where I was physically, but also just kind of like check in where I was mentally with a longer day and on my TT bike outside for the first time in a while. And a week out, I'm looking like, this is like perfect weather. I think this is doable. And then as the days got closer, which is like typical of race day, I was looking at the weather and it was like high of 51, low of like 40. And I was like, man, this is not really adding up because I don't hate cold weather. I started to love cold weather in Kansas City when I lived there for a little while. But I love it. But when it comes to riding in it, no, thank you. Like I will pass very hard on biking outside them. But I also thought, I think you even kind of jabbed me on this one a little bit. I was like, man, let's cold. And you're like, well, could be cold in Galveston too. And
yes,
I was like,
I did. And
the
hard part out there with the cold weather, there's no hills, so you're always going kind of fast.
So you got wind, and then even if there's not wind,
but that's
tailwind. It's like you said, it's Galveston.
I was prepping you out, man.
You were just kind of subtly jabbing me, like poking you with the side with your thumb. I was like, all right, fine, I'm doing it. Like I told you, I'm doing it. So I headed out Thursday, went there, was looking at the forecast, and I was like, man, this is going to be a brisk morning.
Brisk is
my first thought was, you know what, but I wanted to come back. I wanted to be back Friday. I wanted to attempt it and be back Friday to make sure that I was back to have a dinner with Hayden and Allie. And so I got up early and I was like, you know what, maybe I'll just run first.
First,
because I'm all about running first. I was like, maybe just run first, let the sun come out, let things heat up a little bit, get my legs under me, and then just kind of see what it looks like. And then I had a cup of coffee and I just kind of looked at the weather and I was like, it's not going to get better. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. And to be honest with you, I was immediately dreading it. I was like, this is going to be cold and uncomfortable. It's going to be lonely. I'm not going to talk to anybody for, however long I make it. You're not talking to anybody. You're not getting like supportive texts. You're not talking to your buddy on a group ride. There's no one cheering you out. You're just like basically alone in the freezing cold, which I'm not a fan of. So I thought, you know what? The best thing I can do is layer up, and I'm going to at least give myself a shot. So I layered up. I wore socks, which I never wear when I ride. I wore my tri-shorts. I wore running tights with it. I wore arm warmers. I wore my cycling jersey. I wore a long sleeve running shirt over top. I wore my hard shell bike jacket. I wore my cycling gloves. I wore my run gloves over them. I wore my aero helmet for extra ear and head protection to keep me extra warm. And I wore a neck gaiter. So I was the epitome of non-aero. I might as well have been riding in like one of those, like UFC make weight, fight suits like that they sit inside like the sauna with. Like that's what I might as well should have been wearing when I was out there. But I got there, I pulled up, I stepped out of the car because I had the heat blasting from like the time I left my mom's, like a 25-minute drive. Got to I'm like, man, I'm feeling good. Like my core temps up. I was like, this isn't going to be that bad. Got out of the car and I was like, God, this is cold. Like this is not going to be fun. But my first thought was, you know what? I went back to what you said. You're like, Galveston's probably going to be windy, man. It's probably going to be cold. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get on my bike.
You should have poured some water on yourself.
Just to get really we do advise that for like the wetsuit stuff, or hopping into cold water, kind of take the initial shock off. But at that point, I was like, I don't want to be drenched when I start because I'm going to freeze. So I looked out there, and when I looked out to see like how packed the lab was, I saw like 6 people, and they were bundled up like it was 10 degrees outside. They had like parkas on and sweatpants and hoodies, and I'm thinking, this is even cold. This is ridiculous. But I'm just getting on my bike, and I'm just going to see what happens because you never know. And that's something we preach all the time is just put your shoes on and go out for a run because you almost always are going to go farther than you initially think, and you're always going to feel better when you come back. So I started out, admittedly so, little bit too hot out of the gate. I put the hammer down a little bit too early, just trying to get in the groove and just trying to get my core temp up. Anyway, long story short, I was cruising through about 45 miles, and I stopped to refill. I was feeling fairly good. I was getting a little mentally tired. I was still waiting for the sun to come out because it was going to be like a turning point. I felt like in terms of like, just being a little more emotionally energized, and stopped and refueled, came back out, and I could not get warm again. But I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make it another 5 miles. So I made it to 50, and I was like, 50's fine, but 55 sounds better. So I made it to 55, and I was like, all right, I probably can make it to 60. Made it to 60, and I was like, all right. The sun came out, the wind came out, and I was like, man, I cannot get warm. But you know what? 60, I can probably make it to 65. So I kept going. I was like, all right, I can probably make it to 70. So I finally made it to 70, and I was like, all right, you can either, it was either you're going to finish it or you're going to stop now. Because at the rate I was going, I could have gone from 70 to 100 in about an hour and a half, a little bit. I was like, can I make it 90 minutes? Do I want to make it 90 more minutes? And at that point, I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to call it a day. So I got done, and I was at the same time, which I think is something that I think athletes tend to feel frequently, is I was both very proud and equally disappointed all at the same time. And that's very much like, what we talk about with athletes when they finish a race. Like, man, I PR'd, but I really, really want to find, room for, but the wins for me were the overcoming the inconvenience that was it just being really, really, really cold. Like that's not, it was, I think feels like 39 when I started, and it stayed basically in the mid 40s by the time I was done. I was very happy because that is not something I would have normally done. I would have looked for every reason to just do it inside. But I think it helped that I made a special trip to Nashville to do it, or I've been like, I can't waste this trip. Like what, no, you can't.
Yeah. You went out, man.
You got to go. Like you got to go for it.
Yeah. And I mean, you did 3 hours or so and didn't want to do any of it. So think about that. It's like, I think, a lot of times we'll get up and go, I don't want to run today. And then you don't run. But if you go out and do it, same with what you did. I mean, it sounds to me like that wasn't the most enjoyable experience for you. Even
No, it was not.
So it's sort of like you did overcome a lot of things there. And, before you started about that story, and I hope you don't mind, but I want to go back into something you said before that, which is you were today, and November is a kind of a weird thing for you. And it sounds like you have like sort of something maybe, and I think we all deal with this, right? Sometimes we just don't, where there's something a little bit weird. It's almost like you have something latency thoughts that are just kind of stifling or that you're thinking about. And I'm very curious about those because like you said, it's sort of like sometimes we go through and we're like, man, I shouldn't be down right now, or I shouldn't be in a bad place, but we are. So I recognize those moments a lot, actually. It's like, man, everything is like good right now, but it's sort of like something feels like it's looming, or there's something in there. And you talked about how, like, well, for one, it's good to get on these podcasts and talk it out. I think that's what we end up doing a lot, is isolating athletes. Is we'll just be like, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, go out and run and get rid of this. And sometimes it helps a lot, or it doesn't. And I think ultimately it's about either writing it out or talking it out, or getting to just at least addressing it out of your head. You know what I mean? Because like if things get in your head and there's sort of, I'm just real curious about, like, because obviously, I mean, that was how many years ago?
It's 7.
7 years ago. So there's stuff like that. And it's sort of like what I always talk about with these workout breakthroughs, or any kind of breakthrough in life. It just feels like the minute you're starting to get to a point where you're going to make a new breakthrough is when it gets hardest. And there's all these like weird little thoughts and, like, you know, naysayers that kind of get in your brain, and all these weird things like, no, don't move forward, man. Hang back here where it's comfortable. And I think there's really something in there psychologically that we can all sort of look at as far as, you know, training and just moving on with life, things in life, and letting go of things, you know, because sometimes I think letting go of things is the hardest thing.
No, you hit it spot on. I mean, it's like, I think it's very similar to, because it's amazing how much the mind, like how much your mental and emotional state plays into endurance sports and training and performance and race day. And like, to like the same extent, I was talking to an athlete last week, I think, who's training for Ironman Arizona. And I was like, at some point your mind is going to have to catch up to your body, because the way you think right now is the way you thought 2 years ago when we started working together. You still see that same athlete, that same novice, that same person who still needs this, who's really weak on the bike. I was like, your mind is still there. Your body has totally left that behind. Your body is a totally different machine athletically than it was 2 years ago. And you know that because you mention it and you say things, and because you've commented to me about it before, yet your mind always tends, like, it's very interesting. Like, it always tries to, like, tend to take you back. And like, I had that same thought this morning, like, yeah, it's been 7 years, you know, and I was in this funk, and like, yeah, for the most part, like, I spend the majority of my runs and my rides and whatever I'm doing this time, you're just being and I am incredibly grateful for where I am based on where I was at this exact moment, like 7 years ago. And I was feeling that way. And then I got off the exit to pull into the hub, and there was a homeless lady standing underneath the bridge with her grocery cart and a bunch of things just kind of sitting there. And I drove by and I immediately felt worse about myself, you know, which was
really, yeah, that's interesting.
Well, but just because I thought, here you are feeling bad about yourself when you have all this, and because to be honest with you, if I hadn't have done and made the change I did, I would have been there. I'd be dead. Like, I would have, like, that's kind of where I was in my life, you know? And I think it's, you know, I think most people, and I know we have a lot of listeners that have been with us for the last 4 years, and I know a lot of listeners know our backstory, and we also have a ton of new listeners, but like, you know, Mike and I as co-hosts of a podcast, like, we've been best friends for 7 years. And I mean, I remember November very specifically, and, you know, a lot of people don't remember like their last few weeks, and I don't remember a lot as well, like going into before I went to treatment on November 20th. But like, I remember very vividly, like, the conversation you and I had at Edley's sitting outside before I even went. It's probably close to this day around, because it was about 2 or 3 weeks before I actually ended up going, because I had this urge that I was like, I definitely need help. Like, I definitely need help. I think I told you this, like, specifically, I was like, I really, really need to work on some things. I'm probably going to go away for a while and work on those. I'm hoping to go here, but at that point, it's like, no, I wasn't going to go myself. I needed like an extra, like, you know, kick in the rear. But it's amazing how much progress you can make, and yet still have like these feelings that bubble up inside of you out of nowhere. Like, and athletes do the same thing. Like, you progress so much in who you are as an athlete and what you've been able to accomplish, and you see all the numbers that are better and all the performance gains, and you have all these races that are PRs, yet we always have this kind of like annoying little asshole in our brain that's like, hey, but remember me way back when you couldn't do anything. And I think a lot of that's just like the longer, I don't have nearly as many of them as I used to. And I think the farther and the more you distance yourself from that type of person or that type of athletic or athlete, the less frequent they are. But it still happens, because I see how they're like, I'm still this. I'm like, hello, like, am I the only one seeing like what's going on here? Like, scroll back through Training Peaks, last 3 years, you used to run, you know, a 13.5 minute mile. Now you're running 9s. This is not like what's your what you're thinking is not right. You know, and we do that, I think, a lot as athletes, but obviously, you know, as people too. Like we have these feelings that bubble up, and I know athletes specifically, and people, I mean, they're people specifically and athletes second, that like seasonal depression is a huge thing. Like it's like one of those things that like the first, like, and I think it is for me too, like the first cold snap that happens, I'm like, it like just takes me back like almost instantaneously to that like time of year.
It's like a trigger.
It is like, it's a good one, but it's also like, it's a very, I don't know, it's very like whatever, symbolic with like the leaves changing and the temperatures, whatever. But
go on your poetry.
I know, go on your poetry. I'll write something up and post it on the blog. But you know, it is. And I think I would say athletes deal with it a lot, but that I could also say athletes feel that a lot, yet very rarely deal with it a lot, because we tend to bury ourselves in training, you know, in the things that we do and what we're in. And if I'm trying to be honest, and I'd always do my best to be very vulnerable and maybe open on the podcast, is like, I think that may have been part of my like 100-mile jaunt, was that like, not in a negative way, but it was kind of like, sometimes I'm very poor, I think is probably a good word, at accepting positive things in terms of like positive feedback and anything congratulatory or taking compliments. I'm just not very good at it. I'm always kind of I just need to get better. I need to do this. And so it was kind of like, you know, you need to go out and celebrate you. And like, you know, who wouldn't want to think of, hey, you want to go celebrate yourself? Go out and, you know, be torturous for 3.5 hours alone in a lab.
Yeah.
Like, but for me, like that is a huge thing, because I don't, and now that we're kind of like working through that as like a therapist, I'm very, very rarely alone with my thoughts, you know, and that was an opportunity to like put your phone in your back pocket, not look at it, get no notifications, just listen to some music or not, and just be with yourself and your mind for an undetermined period of time, while also working through things in a positive way. Like I wasn't going to go spend 3.5 hours at a bar. I was going to go spend 3.5 hours on my bike, you know, which is obviously a much different thing, to just think through and feel different things. And I think that's what a lot of athletes do as well. And I know that I've been there and probably still do it to an occasion, is like we bury ourselves in our feelings, or we try to at least subdue them in training by, I'm just going to go run it out, or I'm going to go ride it out. And it's not ignoring it, but it's certainly not addressing it. And I think that's something that I think probably more people struggle with than they would, you know, care to be honest about with.
Well, I mean, honestly, I think what you're talking about in some ways is very healthy too, though. I think that and the people that like sort of take responsibility for their own lives, right? You know, and it's never super easy. It seems like there's always challenges, there's always the next corner and all this kind of stuff. But if you can kind of internalize that and say, hey, you know, like I don't really have a reason to be upset right now, or I don't have a reason to be mad, or like, you know, I'm not going to blame other people for my situation. You know, you're taking that by the horns and rolling with it. And I think that's an important step. And I don't think it's always easy. I think there's conflicts and complications with sort of, you know, needing to prove to yourself all the time or what have you. But I don't see anything wrong with that. I think it's just part of the process. And, you know, it's, as we know, one of the most difficult things in life is to just sort of be in the moment and be who you are as you are at this time. And it's always like these, you know, old chapters of our life sort of resurface and kind of like, yeah, you're doing great, but don't forget when you were just a jerk.
That's right. That's right.
You know, it's like, don't ever forget that. And in some ways, I kind of think that's okay, because maybe it's a reminder. It's sort of like, hey, yeah, you're going down this good road, but don't get too cocky. Don't get too like, I'm, you know, my shit don't stink kind of thing, because it's sort of just a grounder in a way. And I think that the subconscious has a way of doing that. And what you did is like, I think natural. I think it's, you know, we talk about it all the time. It's like, you know, my coaching instinct is always to tell people to pull back or whatever. But I think all of us want at least every once in a while. And you're like, you talk about it. It's go see what you're made of, or go see what you got, or go try and fail and go try to burn it out and see what happens, you know, within reason, without getting hurt. And, you know, nobody got hurt on your experience the other day. And you went through a lot, and I'm sure there was a lot of lessons in there. I'm sure you could write a long, interesting blog post about your lab
or poem.
Or poem,
yeah,
about the leaves turning in the lab, and
well, it definitely wasn't about leaves turning in the lab, because that's not the last thing I could think. Yeah, there's no trees close enough. No, I mean it's a very appropriate topic, I think, for a lot of athletes in terms of like, you know, like you said about, you know, just go out there and rip it. And we do those, you know, frequently, or not frequently, but like on occasion. And I think the biggest thing isn't the result you get, but the release. And I think there's appropriate things we can do in training to help release positively, not like, you know, by smashing yourself on the ground every single day, but having at least these opportunities to just unrestrictedly go out and be ourselves and see what we have that day. And I think the biggest area you have to grow from it is like, yeah, I mean, listen, we're always going to, as athletes or type A or whatever you're triathlete, you're always going to pick apart something, you know, like, but there's always going to be more positives than there are negatives. Like, and I went through that kind of triage as I was looking back through my data, and like the last time I did it, and what was my heart rate, what was my power, you know, and then I thought, what was my miles per hour, and then you got the wind, then you got how cold it is, because it's significantly harder to ride in cold temps. The air is denser, it's hard to keep your body warm, you're burning more calories, all in all. But I was like, I guess in a way it was also very symbolic. It was like, you know, I started riding my bike again in August, and before that I hadn't ridden it in 2 years. And basically, like, now I am like riding 70 miles. Like, this is a good thing. Like, there's very little, very, very little to complain about outside of the fact that I was just like kind of wanting to go for this 100 just for the sake of going for it. But it was also, I think, an opportunity to just work through things. And, you know, I think as athletes, that's been like, I was thinking about this the other day, is like, I think it's never been more important. My job has never been more important as a coach as it's been this year. And I think you would say the same. Is like, it's not a year where you're going to sit back and say, you know, 4,328 PRs, you know, 2,476 podiums, you know, 17 Kona qualifiers, 42 70.3 world championship, you know, qualifiers, you know, like you said, all American, you know, that's not the year. It's not, and frankly, that's not how it should be anyway. It's a year where hopefully you help people keep it together. You know,
yeah,
you know, like
exactly,
seriously, like I don't know why I started like thinking about that, but you know, we coach we're very personal, like, you know, as coaches, and we care, and not that coaches don't care, but like, you know, we open ourselves up, you know, obviously on the podcast and through other, you know, forms of communication. It's like, you know, this is a safe place, you know, open up, but through that, you know, openness, you hear a lot of just like really, really heavy and hard things. And this year has brought out the heaviest of things and the hardest of things for so many people that is frankly like zero. It hasn't been anything, you know, related to COVID. It's been depression and anxiety and divorce and suicide and things with their kids. And like, just life is heavy and life is hard. But it's also never been more, I think, important as a coach or as a person who supports an athlete to just be available to them and help provide them some kind of positive outlet and structure that is something that is good, you know, that they can use as a healthy way to just like, and athletes kind of brought it to my own attention. Like, and I recognize it with myself too, is like they're like, I don't know what I would do without these 30-minute runs, these 45-minute runs, like just these opportunities to just be by myself and work through how hard life is, you know, like I think it's the healthiest therapy. You know, I think a lot of people should have therapists, but I think it's one of the healthiest forms of therapy is to just run. Like, I genuinely believe that is that doing a 30, 40-minute run by yourself with no music, or even with music, whatever, is like some of the best therapy you can possibly get. We very rarely get time with just our own thoughts to think through and work things before you got your spouse asking you to do something, your toddler asking you to do something, then you have all your responsibilities, and you have, you know, work to do. It's like you have these thoughts and feelings, and then with about 2 seconds later, you're on to something else, and you never really get to, like, you know, work through them and deal with them. And this year, it's been that year, and I've never been, you know, prouder as a coach to have made it through this year, as challenging as it, you know, has been in many ways. But it's very interesting. I think the more you dig into the psychological aspects and benefits that any kind of endurance training has on the mind and the body, and why people search out specific events like, ultra endurance swims. Like you and I talked about that before, is like we had an athlete, attempt the English Channel, is like what your mind is telling you need to do is it's like our mind and our heart knows long before we really recognize it that we need something. Like we need something to channel this emotion or this feeling that we have, or this future heartbreak that we might go through, or these future obstacles. We need something to allow us to feel strength, that allows us to feel, like we're overcoming things that are hard, to allow us to gain courage, to allow us to gain, these positive experiences, because at some point life is going to, rear its ugly head in a different direction and be like, I'm taking it by the horns, and you at least at that point you have something you can fall back on, which is endurance sports and a healthy community.
Mm-hmm. It's been interesting with our club program, and I'm starting to meet more and more athletes, and I'm laying out sort of maintenance plans for November and December. And it's really crossed my mind a lot, is this idea that, boy, this has been a really hard year. And now we're going into holiday season. And we always talk about holiday season as like the toughest time of the year for training as it is, because you got, just obligations and travel and all these sorts of things. So in my mind, as I put these in there, I've really been emphasizing this idea of like, hey, this may not fit you perfectly, and there may be something that, we're going to take a little time to figure each other out. But just, just the whole goal here is to sort of be better at the end of these 2 months than you are right now. And that could mean a lot of things. It could mean, changing some workouts, shortening some things, but just consistency is the whole goal here. And it doesn't get lost on me that we, like, especially me, and this idea of pulling back, right? And just and getting out and just treating your body and like with respect and care, and like the idea of pulling back. But it doesn't get lost on me that I am a hard driver personally. Like you're talking about these things, it's sort of like I have these unrealistic goals for myself in some level. Like, I mean, like really, I don't know if you ever think like this, but like as you're out at the lab doing your thing and you're like, man, how good can I get? Can I get like 25 miles an hour over the course of, a half Ironman, 26 miles, and like I think like that, or like I always think like in terms of, because I always was around you and you grew up a swimmer, and in my mind I'm like, man, can I get down to like low 1 minute 100s and things like that? And part of me believes that, but like I think when I'm scheduling people and I'm telling them to pull back, and I'm not saying that you can't reach your highest goals, but you have to be ready to reach your highest goals, and that usually, the minute we get out ahead of that is the time when you're going to start not liking the sport, or, hating life, or being injured and all these sorts of things. And it always happens for me sort of towards the end of Ironman training, is when I finally feel like I'm hitting my groove, and it's like, man, all right, I'm in my groove here. I feel strong enough to attempt some of these little bit of, these heavy pushes, or really testing myself, because I'm in good enough shape for it. But I always know that if I had done November and December differently, in January and usually February, if I would have done those months differently, I might be actually closer to this idea of like, hey, I can be a 24-mile-an-hour biker or something like that. And those are the differences, right? And it's just, I don't know, it's always interesting to me to think about how the chains link together. And I don't want it to get lost, I guess, that we want you to get faster too. You know what I mean? It's like we want you to be happy, healthy, and fast. I mean, really, it's just.
I think a lot of people think like that, and I think what you said is important to at least address, is that it's okay to have these thoughts or these hopes or dreams that you may end up at this place somewhere down the line, because I think they're exciting and they're fun. They're like, I kind of like the thought, like I can see myself doing that. But then it's immediately attaching your progress and your worth as an athlete to that instant progression that will lead you there when you have no idea. I think progress comes along the way, but the first thing you have to be obsessed with is being consistent enough to even allow yourself the opportunity to get that to happen. Most people are very disinterested in the work. Most people are obsessed with the result. And that is obviously like that's the biggest problem is like, you know, like when I set out, you know, in August to kind of just generally get back in bike shape, I never, like I had no goals. I was like, let me just kind of see where I'm at and let me just kind of fall back in love with the bike. And, you know, I had like I don't even know how I got back into, like after being 2 years removed from this, just, you know, almost exactly 2 years removed from participating in any kind of triathlon. I don't even really know how I got back into it. To be honest with you, I didn't wake up and like, I think I'm gonna start triathlon again. I think it just kind of like laid itself. I was like, I think I'll start falling in love with the bike. And then I signed up for a race. And the next thing I knew, I feel like I got in pretty decent shape. But if I had set out on August and be like, all right, I'm gonna get on my bike and on, you know, October 30th, I'm going to go to the lab and I'm going to ride 70 miles at just under 22 miles an hour. I'm going to do that. It would have totally skewed every bit of the training that I did because I would have been so obsessed with a metric and an expectation and a result that I would have driven myself from the ground. I would have trained very differently. I wouldn't have been fun because I was already picturing a result that I wanted and thought could happen. And anything less of that would have been a disaster and a failure. And then I look back on the experience and be like, why'd you even do that? Like you need to get better. Instead, it was like, I'll just kind of steer it up. And then I was like, yeah, I'll just kind of go out and see how things go. And there are so many things in the meantime that like you have zero control over. It's just, you have to have this open mind and this, I think, open ability to just let things happen, which is very non-triathlon, you know, or triathlete, you know, not the non-triathlete way is like, I expect this to happen. I have a specific result that I want and I will get it. And it's going to happen no matter what. And then life happens and you, instead of, you know, looking at, you know, life through a magnifying glass and, you know, objectively about all the things that went wrong, all the things that went right, all the things that inhibited you or the obstacles that were in the way, you always criticize yourself on why I couldn't do it because you set out, you signed up for some race, you know, 400 days before and you're like, I'm going to do a 12-hour. And like you have literally no clue how your body's going to respond to any, especially for like people who have never done an event that length. They're like, my goal is to go sub 12. I'm like, why? Where did you even get that from? And to predict how your body's going to adapt to just training is hard enough. Then you think about, now I'm going to sprinkle in relationships and business and pandemic and all these other life stressors. And be like, you know what? Now it makes things even. So the prediction and I drive athletes up. They're like, so what do you think I can do? I'm like, I have no idea. Zero. I'm not like some like, you know, gypsy wizard of horoscope like that. I can't like predict what you're going to do in 6 months based on what, like, because we don't even know what the next week is going to look like. You know, it's like, it's just very, very difficult. And so to set yourself up for that kind of failure is just, it can be so maddening and so discouraging that, and I think it's especially hard for athletes who have like a handful of PRs right off the bat. You know, you're doing PR and PR and be like, all I do is PR, babe. This is how I live. This is how I roll. And then you have a bad race and you're like, oh my God, back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board.
Like, you should be like, it's like things are like the sky has fallen because you finally had, you know, a bad day or an off day, or you did a course that was incredibly challenging. Like if you race long enough, like you're going to have, you know, like I think I've done like 8 or 9 Ironmans and I have 1 PR. Like, and that doesn't mean the other ones were failures, right? It doesn't mean that the other ones were, you know, lackluster or didn't perform as well. Like there are just so many things you can kind of comb through and unpack to find these positive things. Again, going back to like the beginning of the podcast, is like you can find growth in inconvenience. You can also find growth in what you feel like is falling short or failing. There's always an opportunity to pick through and find the positive in anything that occurs in life. And like, this isn't, you know, a bad thought. This isn't a bad feeling, but what is it telling me that I should work through so I can get past it and move to, you know, a totally different direction.
I couldn't help but think when you were saying that about time goals, it's just so interesting to have those. Cause I always do that. I've always done it. And, especially like you said, when you haven't done something like a half or an Ironman, it's like, I don't know how you can really, so unless, you know, maybe a few days before, you should have a pretty good idea. I mean, what you think you can do. But my suggestion on that is always to make it slower or make it higher, because what happens is I've done this before where you go into a race and you're like prepared for it. And then you're like, all right, I think I can do X. And that's sort of the top end. And we talked about this before. It's sort of having A, B, and C goals for races, which I think is another great idea to have like, okay, if everything goes perfectly, I can do A. If it doesn't, then I'll sink into my B goal. And then if something else happens, I'll go C. But like if you start, it's just an interesting philosophy sort of on a full Ironman, for example. If you have like a more reasonable goal, if you're kind of shooting there, I think that just sets you on a tone better for the race. And it sets you up for this idea. Like, for example, if I were to shoot for my first Ironman, I kind of had this in my head. I was thinking 11:30 at Wisconsin, right? And then I was like, well, I know I can do sub 13 or I could do 12:30. I was pretty confident that I could do 12:30, but I set 11:30 as my goal. And the minute I got out of the water, I knew that goal was shot. And then I was like, damn it, now I'm, what, you know, like it was a mental.
Like most athletes.
Yeah, it's a mental gameplay. And then it's all of a sudden, and then you try to overbike and you do all these kind of things. But if I'm like 12:30, my point is, I think if I'd have said 12:30 and then instead of 11:30, I probably would have had the same number in the end, but I would have enjoyed that day a hell of a lot more because I would have probably eased back all the way through the mile 80 of the bike like we talk about, or through mile 20 of the run, instead of just a sufferfest from, you know, pedal stroke one.
You always have to give yourself time to kind of figure out who you are and what you can do. And that's how you race. And that's how you should think about training. Like before you make up these random, like,
it's a good idea.
Thoughts is like, that's what I tell people, like in the email I sent out to our Ironman athletes, I was like, I'm not giving you a pace to run off the bike, because for me to predict how you're going to feel after you swim 2.4 and you bike 112 is insane. Because if I told you, all right, you want to come off the bike, I want to start you at right about 8-minute miles, you're going to start at 8-minute miles, whether you feel crappy or not. And because you can't, like, I think it's a great analogy for how you should look at training, is like, you have no idea, because, you know, and you can treat like the 1.2 as life and the 112 as training, is like, once those things accumulate, you have no idea who you're going to be that day. It could be, the forecast could be perfect and it looks like it's going to be the best day ever, and you think, I'm going to PR, baby. And then at mile 70, that's like, oh, headwind 30 miles an hour for the next 30 miles. And you get just totally defeated thinking, I can't, but I've got to keep up with this time. I'm on pace for a sub 12. I've got to keep this pace. And you shell yourself. And instead of going sub 12, now you're shooting for sub 14 because you blew your load, you know, on the bike. Like you have to always be willing to be patient enough to let the next 15 minutes happen, the next week happen, the next month happen in training, is like, and not jump to a conclusion of how things are going, because it's all real time, and you have to be able to look at yourself and see how things are going in terms of, how are my legs? How's my heart rate? You know, how's my body feeling? Am I feeling enough? Where's my core temp? How are my legs? You know, are this good? Is this bad? Should I fuel more? Should I stop? Should I walk? Should I, you know, scale things back? Am I in a good position? Should I stop here and go to the restroom? Should I wait? It's like, you're constantly triaging things. If you're so obsessed on a specific time or a specific goal, and then you throw all that caution to the wind, then you're going to miss opportunities to address these small little, you know, alerts or red flags, or like, hey, not red flags, but these little itty bitty flags that could be something very minor, but your inability to address them because you're so paranoid or obsessed on a specific goal will turn them into red flags that will end up ruining your day, or it can end up ruining your training cycle because you want to get faster and you have like a small little pain or a niggle. You're like, I can't take any days off. I've got to keep rolling. You know, I've got to keep doing this. And then you run yourself from the ground. Now you're off for 2 months. You know, like, it's just, you have to be real time aware of who you are every day, and just it's very hard for athletes to just flat out accept it and understand that this isn't necessarily good. It's also not necessarily bad. It just kind of is what it is. And whatever it is for today, like, that's okay. It doesn't mean you're gonna be like that for the next week or the next month or the next year or even for the next hour. It just is, that's just who you are this very second. Let's just see where the rest of the day and the rest of the race or the rest of your training takes you.
Mm-hmm. And be aware. Just be aware how you feel, and take credit. Like I was just telling you before this, I'm trying to do my comeback on the running after some injuries, and I've been running the same 3.5 mile loop in the trails. And yesterday was, I think, my 5th or 6th time doing it. I've been walking up all the hills, like every hill. And then yesterday, all the little rollers, I ran them all. And my goal was just to, because I've been keeping my heart rate super low, and I just sort of wanted to feel myself breathe heavy a little bit, you know, just to get that feeling again. And I woke up this morning with just a little bit of soreness, and it was just enough. And because I was tempted to go longer, but I held back, and I'm grateful I did, because I had just enough, like, okay, you ran yesterday, and that's good, but don't, it's just like, you got to keep an eye on that stuff. And I think just paying attention to your body, and of course mind, those kind of things go a long ways if you respect it.
It's hard to listen to your body when the only thing you're tuned into is pace or a result or your watch. Like you become incapable of listening to your body, because all you're fixated on is what your watch says, and you're obsessed with it, instead of just like, you know what, because to be frank, like, what you see doesn't matter. What you're seeing is just a readout of how you feel plus the effort you're putting in. That's it. It's like you could slow down, it's going to slow down with you. Like, you're in charge of what it says, but so oftentimes we get so obsessed with what it says is like, I got to keep that, or I got to make it faster. Even though your body's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, hello, me over here, like in the corner, like, pay attention. Like, I'm the one who's driving this. Like, I'm the bus, and you're driving me off a cliff right now because you're so obsessed with this, miles per hour, you hit me to K. Like, hello, like I'm going to crash and burn. And like, if you just don't do that and don't listen and breathe and understand that, like I was telling myself on my run yesterday, I was like, my first 5 or 6 miles, I was excited to run. I was like, slow it down. I said, like, out loud, I was like, slow it down, man. Reel it in. It's like I found myself getting like excited because it was cold. Or not cold, but it was a little bit cooler. And I was like, man, I feel really good. And I had a great run the day before. And so I had this, like, I was like, man, today's going to be another good run. And it was okay. But after like 5 or 6 miles, I was like, all right, let's pick it. Nope. Just reel it in. Just stay patient. Just be relaxed, and then wait. Because honestly, like, that's the best thing you can ever tell yourself. Just wait. Just wait a little bit longer. Just wait a little bit longer. Because no one has ever, like, very few athletes ever say, it's for maybe like for a 5K or a 10K, they might say, I wish I would have thrown it down a little bit earlier. But for a 70.3 or a full, I've never had to be, you know what, coach? Waited too long.
Yeah, I know.
Didn't throw down the hammer till mile 20, man. I just had those last 6 miles, like, I was ripping it. Like, no one ever says that, because it's a practice in restraint.
I was going to say, that's patience. Back to that thing about the pool earlier. It's sort of like you practice that in your training, because in a race, if that thought crosses your mind, whatever it is, unless it's after, like you said, mile 20 in the run and you feel like you got something left, the idea is, like, if you think about, should I pick it up? That's when you should probably back it down, for the most part in these Ironman, for most people, And
it even goes back to, like, what you were saying at the beginning about the comment from Heather, was like finding, opportunity within inconvenience. In order to do that, you have to have the energy to be able to mentally and emotionally put yourself in that box of, I'm going to make this into a positive. Because the more tired and exhausted and spent you are when you find that, like, that's why I always get, like, totally flabbergasted. I was like, oh my God, somebody kicked my goggles at the start of the race, and like, my day was over. I'm like, what? What do you mean your day was over? That's like I can maybe see that, like, somebody tripped you at like mile 23 of the run and you skinned your knees and you couldn't walk. Like, I can see that. But you're just started. Like, you're 5 minutes in. No one ruined your day. You allowed that experience or that obstacle or that incident to ruin your day. That was your choice. But you have to have the energy later on in the day to have these obstacles happen, that you're like, and overcome them and find opportunity within that to continue on or to be patient. That's why it's always like, just be patient. Not yet. And then finally, you'll probably end up being like, all right, I can go now. And thank God I didn't go 10 minutes early, because I don't have that much left. Like, it always ends up being a better result, not a, man, coach, tell you what, man, I know I ran my last 5K, my PR, that last 3 miles in the marathon, I guess held back too long. I really think I should have hit it harder on the bike. No, never happens, ever. Like, just be patient, because it all goes back to something we talk about, especially for Ironman athletes. It's not how fast you go, it's how little you slow down. And the decisions you make each and every moment, from the time you get in the water, all about how can I run well the last back half, and how little can I slow down? Because most people go fast, almost going nowhere. Like, not even a brisk walk, like a slow meandering through the last half marathon or even last 20 miles. Like, it's all about the marathon. I don't know how we got there, but it is. It's all about the marathon. So if you're racing this weekend, remember, every decision that you make, from the time you put your goggles on, from the time you get in the water, ask yourself, is what I'm about to do going to allow me to run the back half of the marathon? And if you're doing it, and you're running the back half of the marathon, you should watch and pick out and point and count. Maybe take one of those little clicker counters they have at like when you walk into stadiums and click and how many people you pass on the back half of the marathon, because I guarantee you it will be in the hundreds, if not over 1,000, if you can run the back half of your marathon. So run well, race happy.
I had a quick strategy thought.
A strategy thought?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're out on the bike. See those mile markers along the course? Add 10 miles to the distance in your mind.
That you have left or less?
Add more that you have left.
That's a good one.
I mean, and then add like every time you see a mile marker, say it says, mile 18, think you're on mile 17.
Wait. Be patient.
It's just a
thought.
It's
And
an idea.
the last little bit of just a general.
Think you're running further than you're on.
Yeah, that's true. And just last little general bit of housekeeping. Do yourself a favor. Don't decorate your house for Christmas until after Thanksgiving.
Here we go.
Thanksgiving is the greatest holiday on earth. And if you decorate for Christmas beforehand, it is sacrilege. But on this more serious note, we appreciate you tuning in. We hope you found this podcast to be a benefit to you, your life, and in your training and racing. We appreciate you as always, just for giving us your time. It means a lot to both of us. If you want to check out the rest of our website, you can go to c26triathlon.com for all things coaching, camps, and community, and also the previously mentioned club membership. If you have any questions, comments, comments, concerns about anything and everything, Mike, crushingiron@gmail.com, or you can reach out to me directly, c26coach@gmail.com.
All right, Coach.
See you.
Got it.